Mothra has always been one of Toho's most popular monsters, having not only appeared multiple times throughout every Godzilla era, but also ranking among Toho's highly coveted Big Five monsters. So, it should come as a surprise to absolutely no one that when Mothra entered the Heisei Godzilla series in 1992's Godzilla vs. Mothra, that film would become the most attended Godzilla film of the era, and also having the highest attendance of any Godzilla film since the mid-1960s, only being surpassed in 2016 by Shin Godzilla. With Godzilla taking a hiatus to make way for an upcoming American reboot, it was only natural for Toho's next step in making a kaiju film to be one focused on the Queen of the Monsters herself, and by the end of the 90s, we got one. Wait, what? And by the end of the 90s, we got two. Wait, again? And by the end of the 90s, we got a whole trilogy of Mothra films, in a series that has now been known in the West as the Rebirth of Mothra Trilogy. The Rebirth of Mothra Trilogy is an interesting beast to talk about. Comparing this to its surrounding competition, the Heisei and Millennium era Godzilla films, which have had a much more varied reception over time, opinions on the Rebirth of Mothra Trilogy were always quite mixed. Many people really like these movies, and many people really don't. And as with many of Toho's non-Godzilla kaiju films, I haven't seen them. Until now! I decided to finally give them a shake recently, and I've got quite a bit to say about them, as you can tell. But did I think that these movies were good, trash, or somewhere in between? Well, let's find out as we dive into the Rebirth of Mothra Retrospective. Rebirth of Mothra 1 is definitely the film I had the least expectations for. I really had no idea what to expect going into it. I'm not a fan of the last three Heisei Godzilla films whatsoever, and my biggest concern was whether or not this movie was just going to be more of the same as those films. But to my surprise, I finished watching the movie and I said to myself,
I liked it.
I gotta say, Rebirth of Mothra is shockingly pretty alright. Not to say that this movie doesn't have its issues, it absolutely does, and we'll get to those soon, but in general, I like this one quite a bit. The first thing I gotta mention is the technical aspects of this movie. First off, the effects work. I don't know what happened between this film and the final few Heisei Godzilla films, but Rebirth of Mothra just looks better. For the most part. This film does include a few instances of CGI models pasted onto the live-action backgrounds, such as this one scene where Fairy Mothra and Garu Garu have a dogfight inside this house, and yeah, it doesn't look good at all. It's trying to get the effect that these tiny creatures are flying around really fast and there's all these lasers and explosions going on, but it just feels like a really cheap green screen effect. Aside from that though, the actual practical effects look pretty solid. You get instances of noticeable strings here and there, whether they be digitally scrubbed out or just left in the footage, but the rest of the film looks pretty well polished. The actual sets are the things that I was most impressed by. Comparing these countryside sets to the ones used in something like Godzilla vs. Mechagodzilla 2, and the sets in Rebirth of Mothra just feel much more vibrant and lived in. Lots of rolling hills in both the foreground and background, as well as plenty of detail up front, make for sets that are very dynamic. While the Imago Mothra props still suffer from the same sort of stiffness that they had in the previous Heisei films, the Mothra larva prop looks really good. Supposedly, getting the movements of the larva right was something that effects director Koichi Kawakita really wanted to do, and I'd say he did a fantastic job. This undulating system for Mothra makes him feel very lifelike, and honestly might be my favorite looking Mothra larva right alongside the Chinese dragon-style 1961 Mothra. And then, of course, there's the film's villain, Deskidora, and he looks splendid. Kawakita definitely learned a thing or two from working on Orochi the Eight-Headed Dragon, because Deskidora is absolutely the special effects standout in this film, being the focal point of many of the film's fight scenes and just effect scenes in general, with him not only being a very impressive and imposing looking monster, but also utilizing a ton of fire-based weapons, including his own fire breath and when he goes about destroying the forest around him. You can just tell that the crew had a ton of fun with the pyrotechnics. The effects also have a great range to them, with some of them being these massive sets such as this one of the collapsing dam, and others being quite simple, such as this golden glitter that flies off Mothra's wings. While absolutely not perfect, the effects in this movie are pretty good. Then there's the score, which goes unbelievably hard. The music for all three of these movies was done by Toshiyuki Watanabe, who has also done a couple of other scores including some Super Sentai shows. Of course you have some pretty good Mothra songs in here. The new cover of the classic Mothra song remains consistent throughout the entire trilogy, as well as at least one new song per movie, which in this case being the appropriately titled Mothra Leo. Then you get to the actual original film score, which has several really catchy, memorable tunes. The theme that plays when Mothra shows up to fight Deskidora is seriously awesome. It has a similar sound to something like Ultraman Tiga, which, funny enough, also released the same year as this movie. I guess 1996 was a great year for kaiju soundtracks. Just like the special effects, the score also has a great range to it as well, ranging from determined and hopeful to dour and sad. It's an extremely underrated score, and I'd recommend that you go and give it a listen. Another thing I enjoyed about this movie was what was done with Mothra's fairies, now known as the Elias in this trilogy. To my knowledge, this was the first time that there was any sort of differentiation between the two of them, not only being color-coded but also having distinct names, Mole for the red one and Laura for the blue one. They also have distinct personalities as well, with Mole taking more of a leadership role and being more serious, while Laura is a bit more of a jokester. Shockingly enough, this was only done in this movie, as later appearances have them kinda just going back to being one and the same again, and we wouldn't get different Mothra twins until over 20 years later when the Godzilla series finally started experimenting with them again. But wait, there's more! We now have a third member of Mothra's fairies in the form of Mole and Laura's evil sister, Belvera. I really like this character. She brings a lot of flair to this film and adds to the dynamic of the Elias by being this flamboyant, mustache-twirling villain who wants to destroy the Earth with Deskydora just because. My favorite version of Mothra's fairies will always be those that were played by the Peanuts, but these definitely come in at a close second. Now let's move on to the monsters of this movie. Mothra is Mothra. There isn't really a whole lot to add to this version of the Queen of the Monsters that hasn't been done in previous versions. I'm not a fan of the design. It looks really stiff and fake to me, but other than that, I like this version fine. Moving on to the villain of the movie, Deskydora is so cool. I already mentioned him as a special effect earlier, but his design is also really great. He honestly might be a top 3 Ghidorah design for me, coming in just behind Showa Ghidorah and Shin Ghidorah. He's much more inspired by Western dragons than Eastern ones, with him having a more basic black and red color scheme, walking all fours with 2 wings, and breathing fire instead of the more traditional gravity beams, though he does have a few beams of his own that he uses from time to time. I also really love what he represents in this story. Considering that this movie is about environmental destruction, primarily deforestation, having the villain be a monster whose whole thing is draining the life of a planet by mainly targeting forests really works, and we get to see a ton of damage and destruction that this thing leaves behind through the previously stated pyrotechnics and explosions. The monster villains are the one thing that even people who hate these movies really like, and Deskydora is absolutely a great kaiju villain. A monster who poses a genuine threat while also just being damn cool looking. And finally, we come to the star of the show, Mothra Leo. I really liked Leo in this movie. He definitely made one hell of a first impression when he stood up to Deskydora in both his larva form and his imago form, whipping out a ton of new powers that other Mothras just didn't have before. Honestly, I'm not too big on this particular Leo design. This design is just too green for my taste. I get that it's supposed to represent the greenery of the earth or whatever, and it does make sense considering where he transformed into his imago form, but it's just too much green for my liking. There's also Fairy Mothra and Garu Garu, but I don't have really much to say. They're cool new toys for the Elias to fly around on and are specifically designed to sell cool toys. That's kinda it. Overall though, this monster cast was very good. Alright, now moving on from everything I liked, it's now time to get into the more negative half of this movie. Now, first things first, throughout all this section, have you guys by any chance noticed anything? Yeah, I haven't talked about any of the human characters here, and that's because there's basically nothing to say about them whatsoever. Our main characters are this family consisting of a dad who works for the deforestation company, the mom who does mom things, and the kids Taiki and Wakaba, who serve as our main characters in this movie. I say main characters with hesitation because they basically don't do anything in this movie. The most they contribute is keeping the magical seal that is being used to control Deskydora away from Belvera, and also use it to help power up Mothra. But other than that, that's basically it. I'm gonna drop a bit of a hot take here. I don't get why this movie even has human characters. I think it might be something to do with how we need to have a more grounded human focus because so much of the movie deals with stuff that we're doing to the planet. But even still, the parents, who, keep in mind, are the ones who are harming the planet, don't have much to do either. They just chase around their children for basically the entire runtime. We've already established that the Elias have plenty of personality and a solid foundation of which to build a story off of, so why not just use them as the leads of the movie? My best guess would be that green screening them into background and building sets to accommodate the fact that they're only 6 inches tall would be far too much, so we gotta have these people that don't do anything. I know I'm sounding like one of those Godzilla fans who just complains about why we need human characters in a movie at all, but I think here it's somewhat justified, right? If you have some characters that take up a majority of the screen time that are uninteresting versus characters who don't take up as much screen time but are far more interesting, wouldn't you want to see those characters instead of the other ones? I don't know, the characters in this movie kind of blow. Moving on, the other problem I have with this movie is the ending. It's kind of just a whole cavalcade of dumb stuff happening at once. So, Mothra Leo seals away Deskidora, and the world is saved. Yippee! So that just leaves Belvera to be dealt with. However, Maul and Laura intervene and let her go because she's still their sister and they still love her. They also compare their sibling rivalry to Wakaba and Taiki's sibling rivalry, which... no. Look. Speaking as someone who is the younger sibling and did have some sort of sibling rivalry thing growing up, there's a big difference between a couple of sibs having a fight every now and then versus your sister intentionally unleashing a 3-headed, planet-killing, demonic alien beast to purposely destroy the planet and knock that up to, well, you know, she just does a little bit of trolling. Like, I get that they're family and stuff, but I feel like if anyone in my family would do that, I'd disown them in a heartbeat. I get that they want to keep Belvera around to use throughout the entire trilogy, but I don't know why even just keeping her in a prison cell wouldn't be good enough. After that cosmic blunder, we get the whole moral of people needing to be more environmentally conscious so we can make sure to protect the planet, yada yada yada, we all know this by now. But like, the destruction that you are looking out over isn't from you, it was from the previously mentioned planet-killing demon. You don't have the right to spout out that moral while looking at this. And then Mothra just kind of shows up and fixes everything and just, why? Okay, I know why. It's a kid's movie at the end of the day, and you can't leave them with an ending where the forest is absolutely foobarred. This isn't the Lorax. But still, I feel like Leo just magically fixing everything is kind of a cop-out. I feel like it could have had the moral spouted out after Mothra fixes the environment. Like, after he fixes everything, we could have our characters look out over their beautiful new landscape and be like, damn, we're really destroying all this beautiful nature, aren't we? We should be more conscious of how much deforestation we do in the future. Or something like that. You know, something less Deus Ex Machina-y. You know, something less Deus Ex Machina-y. You know, something less Deus Ex Machina-y. That's really hard to say. Aside from that though, that's pretty much it for Rebirth of Mothra 1. Is it perfect? Good lord no. But I was genuinely impressed by how not bad this movie turned out being. I knew that this was a kid's film going in and heard about how kinda lame this was, but after watching it, this is definitely the kind of kids movie in which kids could get an absolute kick out of it, and if you're an adult watching too, you'll get something out of it as well. This movie is shockingly quite a bit of fun, and I could definitely see myself visiting it again in the near future. Honestly, the more I think about this movie, the better it gets. Not by much, but it is growing on me more and more, and I'm gonna give this movie a solid 6 out of 10. So, Rebirth of Mothra 2.
That sucked.
Yeah, I'm not gonna be beating around the bush for this one. This movie blows. You know, for a while I was trying to figure out how exactly I was gonna approach reviewing this movie in comparison to movie 1. And honestly, a lot of that figuring out came from the fact that my biggest problem with Rebirth of Mothra 2 is that it is just so unbelievably, obscenely boring. That's basically the big gist of what's wrong with this movie. Remember when I said that Rebirth of Mothra 1 sort of escapes the trappings that the Heisei Godzilla films fell into? Well, Rebirth of Mothra 2 falls directly back into those, and what do you know, the end result is crap. However, I wouldn't necessarily say that these films are the most direct comparison you can make to Mothra 2 in terms of just being a stupid, boring movie. There are comparisons that could be made, particularly between this and something like Space Godzilla, in which the final battle goes on for entirely too long. But I think to properly describe what kind of movie this is, I'm gonna have to go back a little bit further. My most direct comparison for Rebirth of Mothra 2 is Godzilla Raids Again. Raids Again at its core is a boring film with boring characters I do not care about, doing boring things I do not care about, and the entire film just stagnates after a certain point where I just want to fast forward to the end because nothing is happening. That's Rebirth of Mothra 2. After about 30-ish minutes, all of our characters arrive at Nilai Kanai, this ancient civilization that was lost to time after it was destroyed by the monster villain of the movie, Dagara. From then on, it can basically just be summed up as the characters running around through empty hallways and encountering the temple's many obstacles until they meet up in a room, and then run around the hallways again until they reach another room, and then after a while they all run outside to escape the temple as it's being destroyed by Leo and Dagara in the final fight. Oh, and by the way, Mothra, Leo, and Dagara are having this huge fight that takes them through cities, the countryside of Japan, and under the sea. This would be pretty exciting if it weren't stretched out over 70% of the film's runtime. Some of the action is neat from time to time, but there's far too little to keep my investment in this movie. You know what else would be something cool to keep my investment in this movie going? If I actually cared about the characters in this. And guess what? I don't. Once again, we're back to these lame-ass humans who don't do anything throughout the entire story. We have these 3 kids who act as our main characters, and I cannot tell you anything about them other than one is the girl, one is the fat one, and one is the nerd. And then we have these 2 fishermen who are being controlled by Belvera, I think, and there's nothing to them either. Once again, I have to bring up the question of why do we have human characters in this movie when we already have 3 solid characters in the Elias that could very easily lead their own film without people. Again, I think it has something to do with pollution in the ocean being this film's primary environmental point, just like how deforestation was in the last film. But again, just like last time, the destruction of the ocean doesn't have anything to do with the characters in the story. It has to do with Dagara, the story's evil monster. I think the only purpose these humans have is how, just like in the last movie, the girl has to take care of the magical MacGuffin thing, this time being the silly little guy called a Go-Go that acts as the treasure of Nilai Kanai and also pisses on people to heal them. I wish I was joking. I feel like I'm retreading a lot of what I said about the human characters of this film and what I said about the human characters in Mothra 1. But Mothra 2 really does just fall into the same traps as the first film when it comes to its human characters. They don't do anything other than act as vessels for the audience and be walls in which the exposition is thrown at you. So, do the Elias fare any better? Unfortunately, they do not. You know how the first film actually made some sort of attempt to give Maul and Laura personalities? Well, you can kiss that goodbye because they're basically here to act as exposition and nothing else. Normally, this wouldn't be an issue because the Mothra twins are usually vehicles for exposition anyways, but I think if you made some sort of attempt to make them into characters with their own personalities, why not develop that further in the second installment? It's such a shame because while, yes, the first film didn't have an interesting human cast either, at least the 3 Elias siblings were interesting to watch, but now 2 out of 3 of them just aren't.
Hey, so this is editing Sam the Geigen fan here, just to hop in for a moment to bring up something. So you know how I said in my or in the Rebirth of Mothra 1 section that I mentioned that the twins were color coded? Mole was red and Laura was blue. Well, for some reason in this movie they flipped it. They flipped it. So Mole's the blue one, Laura's the red one. I don't know. I don't know why this was done. I really don't. Anyway, back to the review.
So this begs the question, how does the third one fare? Well, how do you think? Belvera also barely has anything to do here. She just wants to find the treasure of Nilai Kanai because... Okay, I'm gonna be real with you, I don't know either. I guess she's trying to take control of Dagara as well because... I don't know. Wait, actually, there is something mildly interesting they do here with the Elias. So, by the end of the film, Nilai Kanai is crumbling beneath the characters' feet, and they all have to escape with all these rocks falling around them and stuff. And just as one
wall of fire
is about to
burn
everyone, Belvera
closes a door
and then flies away on Garu Garu. So, okay, Belvera may be showing signs of some sort of redemption arc. Okay, is there another scene that talks about this more at the end of the movie? What do you guys think? Honestly, it would be so cool to see more signs of Belvera having a redemption arc. Like, maybe she has some sort of change of heart after Dagara starts absolutely wrecking Mothra, and she joins her sisters in an attempt to stop him, or maybe she actually helps all of her characters escape the temple. I don't know. Something would be nice. The only actually really cool idea with the characters, and they decide to do nothing with it. Great job. It really does suck that the Elias just aren't interesting in this movie. Like I stated before, they were the highlight of movie 1, so seeing them diminish to these nothing characters just blows. One thing I can say I do like about this movie are the monsters. First, let's start with Mothra. Leo actually gets a bit of an upgrade in this movie, getting not 1, but 2 brand new forms, the first of which being Rainbow Mothra. And yeah, this is where Leo looks his coolest. While I do like Leo's rainbow form in Mothra 3, I like the rainbow pattern in this one more. It actually looks like a rainbow, with bits of red, orange, yellow, green, blue, and purple all there in some sort of gradient pattern. I really do love this look for the character. And then we have the upgraded Aqua Mothra form. I don't really have much to say here. This form looks pretty cool. I like how sleek and fish-like it is, and I like how it properly uses Leo's ability to split into multiple tiny moths as a proper attack. Now let's move on to the villain of this movie, Dagara. Dagara, just like Deskidora before him, is really cool. He's a monster made by the Neelai Kanai civilization that went rogue and decided to start destroying the civilization and the oceans around him, also producing these crazy starfish-looking things called Barum, which choke up the oceans as well as cripple Mothra Leo for a good portion of the film. The whole bioweapon going rogue angle is an idea that I really quite enjoy, and it's cool to see that this monster actually leans pretty hard into that angle as well. Having these shoulder cannons that shoot out Barum and being able to cause tornadoes that throw Mothra through quite a loop. I don't really have a lot to say about Dagara. He's a cool looking monster with a cool set of powers that acts as a pretty good antagonist for the story. He's a good boy. And yeah. That's basically all the positive things about this movie. Well, okay, not really. Like before, the music rocks and the effects are decent, for the most part. That water slide looks sick, by the way, where is it? But that would pretty much just be me repeating stuff I said about the first movie, which I've already done enough in this section. Honestly, I think the biggest problem I have with Rebirth of Mothra 2 is that, in comparison with the first film, it's just way more kiddie. Like, okay, the first film is obviously a kid's film, full stop. But at least with that film, you could watch it and at least get some sort of enjoyment out of it. Not necessarily a film for the whole family, but it isn't an insufferable watch either. Meanwhile, Mothra 2 feels like a film that's made for kids and kids exclusively. It doesn't have that same hook that the first film has, where you could watch this and have a good time even if you're outside the target audience. Mothra 2 is just a boring kids film through and through, with very few things that can actually redeem it, and honestly, in retrospect, unlike the first film, which gets better and better the more I think about it, this just gets worse and worse, and I have no desire to watch it outside of marathoning the entire trilogy. So I'm gonna give this a 3 out of 10. Let's just hope that the final film in this trilogy can bring us out of the depths of the sea and into a truly great finale. So, let me explain to you the plot of Rebirth of Mothra 3 real quick. So, King Ghidorah returns to Earth after wiping out all the dinosaurs 130 million years ago to kidnap all the children in Japan and keep them in a giant dome to eat them. Then Mothra, who gets absolutely pummeled by Ghidorah, decides that the only way to defeat the space monster is to travel back in time to fight him when he first showed up 130 million years ago. So, using the power of a song sung by a 6-inch tall woman, Mothra travels back in time, fights King Ghidorah, and wins, causing the mighty dragon monster to disappear. However, Mothra dies and gets fossilized by some primitive Mothras. But then, King Ghidorah returns to the present day from a piece of his tail that got blasted off by Mothra millions of years ago. However, Mothra returns in a brand new armored form that quickly makes short work of Ghidorah, and then everyone lived happily ever after. The end. This movie sounds utterly bonkers, right? Well, it absolutely is. But you know what's more surprising? This movie is actually pretty damn good. And honestly, I'd go as far and say that this is the best Toho Kaiju film of the Heisei era since Godzilla vs. Biollante. Yeah, I mean it. In basically every way, shape, and form, Rebirth of Mothra 3 is a big step up from not only Rebirth of Mothra 2, but is also a step up from Rebirth of Mothra 1. There are plenty of things that this movie improves on in comparison to its predecessors, but there is one thing in particular that this movie improves on. Ladies, gentlemen, and other peoples of the audience, we finally have a Rebirth of Mothra movie in which there's an actual reason for there to be human characters! So this was something that actually came to me while I was writing the script for this video, but the reason why I think the inclusion of human characters in this story works so well is because they are directly tied into the central conflict of the story. Ghidorah and Dagara were certainly threatening and destructive monsters in their own right, but they were far more destructive towards the environment around them, whether that be directly in the former's case or indirectly in the latter's. King Ghidorah, however, is the only monster in this trilogy that actively targets people, specifically children. So you could have a kid character that's experiencing all of this going on around them, and maybe they have siblings that are stuck inside King Ghidorah's dome, and obviously since these are kids they gotta have parents with them too, and oh my god, we developed the primary human cast of this film. Now, would I necessarily say that this main cast is good? Not really, no. The main family is built around the existence of our main character, Shota, but for what it is, it's fine. Everyone here has a role to fill, and it's great to see a film in this trilogy that actually has human characters play some sort of important role. Not only that, but even Shota has a role to play in this film outside of just being the mandatory kid character. You see, King Ghidorah put Laura under mind control, and supposedly the only thing that could break it is the innocence of a child. Enter Shota, who actually succeeds in breaking the curse and freeing Laura. It's so nice that the final movie in this trilogy actually puts its human characters to use, instead of just having them to have them. This was something that the prior two movies seriously needed, but hey, it's here now, and it's great. Speaking of characters, The Elias. This film is pretty special in that this is the first and only film in which Mothra's fairies actually have an active role to play in the story. They aren't just singing songs and giving Mothra support or whatever, they actually have their own little journey to go on. I'll get Maul and Laura out of the way first because they admittedly have less to do story-wise. Just like in Mothra 2, they lose that sense of individuality they had in the first film and are kind of as one singular character again, which is a shame. But I do actually like what's done with them here. They're actually separated for a good chunk of the runtime, and that's mainly because of the previously mentioned King Ghidorah mind control. Not only that, but Maul also dies midway through the film due to singing the song that allows Mothra to travel back in time. So that ramps up the tension due to the fact that not only is one of the twins gone, but the other one is under Ghidorah's spell. Undeniably though, the MVP when it comes to the Elias in this movie is Belvera. Belvera fully completes her redemption arc that was somewhat set up in Mothra 2. This time actively searching for the Elias Triangle, a weapon that is integral to the defeat of King Ghidorah. Even after she loses the weapon, she still actively seeks out ways to defeat the dreaded King of Terror, even getting trapped inside King Ghidorah's dome and even trying to break Laura's curse as her own side quest. And once she and Laura actually do get the Elias Triangle together, she doesn't betray Laura and do her own thing, she actually sticks by her sister's side in order to help defeat King Ghidorah. She was a good character here, and this film definitely makes for a nice conclusion to her journey throughout all three films. It makes watching the whole trilogy a worthwhile experience. Moving on from the characters, we have the special effects, and there was certainly a big change here. Instead of Koichi Kawakita doing the effects for this one, we now have Kenshi Suzuki, who Godzilla fans would know from his work on Godzilla 2000 and Godzilla vs. Megaguirus. His work on those films was definitely a little rough around the edges at certain times, with 2000 having a notoriously short production time, leading to a lot of rushed effects work, and Megaguirus not really faring much better. And there was definitely a similar trend when it comes to this film. There was a lot of green screen used here, particularly during the aerial battles between Mothra and Ghidorah, and they don't really look that good. They're better than something like the house fight in Mothra 1, but it just kind of feels like the monster props are just being shuffled around across a stock forest background as opposed to being actually integrated with the scene. The suits and props here look really good though. While I'm admittedly not the biggest fan of King Ghidorah's designs in both the present day and the past, I cannot deny that the suits themselves have a lot of life put into them. The Mothra props too look really great as well. Not only is the updated Rainbow Mothra look a really nice design, but the armored and eternal looks that Leo gets are really cool looking designs. There are admittedly some nice looking set designs here as well. The Cretaceous period does have a very unique look with red sky backgrounds, and the dinosaurs look pretty decent, and there are some pretty nice looking forest sets here too. Not as good as Mothra 1, but they're alright. The effects overall I'd say are a mixed bag just like Godzilla 2000, with admittedly quite a few highlights and quite a few bad spots. The score in this movie too goes hard just like all the others. The standouts for me are King Ghidorah's theme, which honestly might be my new favorite Ghidorah theme, and the brand new Mothra song for this film, Heora Mothra, and I probably just butchered that pronunciation. I don't know, I just got it from Google Translate. Honestly, I'd go as far and say that this song is in the same tier as something like Sacred Springs or Call Happiness in terms of other Mothra songs. I know saying that a Rebirth of Mothra score being really good is me being a broken record, but it does bear repeating that these scores are legitimately very good. Speaking of things that are very good, this film marks the first time a kaiju originating from the Godzilla series has made an appearance in a non-Godzilla film, and that of course is Big Shitter. I mentioned earlier that I'm not particularly a big fan of these Ghidorah designs. I think they're a bit too exaggerated for my taste. King Ghidorah always had a pretty crazy design, but this is just a bit much. Not bad designs by any means, and there are King Ghidorah designs that I find much worse than these two, but they're just not really my thing. With that said though, how King Ghidorah is portrayed is a different story. It's genuinely crazy to me that this is the first time since the mid-1960s that Ghidorah had this genuine sense of apocalyptic terror that had sorely been missed in both his later Showa appearances and his Heisei appearances. He's regularly referred to as the King of Terror by the Elias, and is shown actively laying destruction of both cities in his modern form and prehistoric Earth in his Cretaceous form. His early scenes too add this sense of dread by showing him kidnapping children in very eerie ways. One minute you see a bunch of kids, the next it's all vacant and a three-headed space demon flies overhead. Ghidorah is also given plenty of cool abilities here too. I love the purple gravity beams that he shoots from his wings, and his ability to mind control things is stupid cool. I don't get why any other Godzilla film has used this ability. I also love just how much of a powerhouse he is in this movie, absolutely wiping the floor with Leo, and the only way that he could possibly be defeated is through a multi-million year battle that ricochets back from the modern day to the Cretaceous Cretaceous period to the modern day again. That coupled with the genuine consequences added to this fight, such as both Mothra and Maul dying in order to achieve their goal, and also that it technically doesn't work at a certain point, really gives this film real tangible stakes that the other two films seem to lack. This isn't my favorite version of the character, not when both Shin Ghidorah and Anime Ghidorah exist, but I do really love what was done with Ghidorah here. I admittedly don't have much to say about Mothra in this one that hasn't been said in my discussions of the previous two movies. I like him here. He's got a cool new set of forms, and I like the multi-million year battle that he has against Ghidorah. It's great stuff. Overall, I find the fact that Rebirth of Mothra 3 is as good as it is kinda shocking. This film takes a lot of what didn't work about its previous two installments and properly fleshes them out and gives them a lot of focus while also maintaining what was great about those set installments. This was a damn enjoyable and entertaining film, and honestly, I'd say that if there's one film from this trilogy that I would recommend you check out, it would be this one. I'm hesitant to calling it great, but it's a pretty damn good movie that I'm gonna watch again in the future, even outside of marathon purposes, and I'm gonna give this one a 7 out of 10. So, that was the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, and did I think it was good? Well, I thought 2 out of 3 of them were, so there's that. In all seriousness though, I'm very glad that I watched the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy, flaws and all. Aside from the fact that these were just more non-Godzilla Toho kaiju films I could check off my list, there were plenty of great things that these movies had in store that I think definitely shouldn't go overlooked, particularly the music. But I do think that this trilogy is a fine time overall. Is it the best kaiju trilogy out there? Good God, no. Off the top of my head, I can think of one trilogy that I can say is better, and another that absolutely curb stomps it and then some. For what it is though, the Rebirth of Mothra trilogy is okay. I would definitely recommend it to someone who hasn't seen it, though I'd advise them just to skip Mothra 2 personally. Even if I think these movies have their fair share of problems, I still think that there is plenty of good to be found within them as well. So if you haven't seen it already, go check it out. I'm sure that you'll find something pretty cool about it. But, of course, these were just my thoughts, and I want to know yours. What's your favorite film of the trilogy? What's your favorite monster villain? And what do you like the most out of these movies? Be sure to sound off those thoughts and more in the comment section down below, and be sure to follow me on my social medias and join my Discord server if you want updates on upcoming videos or just want to hear my goofy rants about giant monster stuff. And if you like what you saw and want to see more, then be sure to hit that subscribe button. Either way, I'm Sam the Geigen fan, telling you all that destroying the environment is bad, and telling you all to wash your hands. Wait, I nearly forgot to mention that Mothra Leo's the first ever male Mothra. Like, that's actually kind of a big deal considering that Mothra is almost always a girl in her films. Okay, now the video is over. Bye bye everyone.